All right, y'all. So just wrapped up a quick little. Honestly, I just did about a half hour little workout, little half-hour workout. A lot of abs. I did some delts, some leg extensions, and some curls. That's it. Nothing too crazy. About a half hour. All right. So real quick, I want to talk to y'all about the serpent. I'm gonna title this one "The Serpent in the Garden." Right. So everybody know the Bible story, the Garden of Eden. So I've been spending weeks on top of weeks deciphering it, doing some etymological research, some ancient research, reading the Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mysticism. The Kabbalah has to do with Jewish mysticism, declassifying and deciphering the first five books, which is the Torah, the Pentateuch. So I've been doing a lot of research. So here's what I found. I'm going to share this with you guys. If you're watching it, hopefully you can find some of this information useful in your spiritual journey and your walk of life. Just even if it's not spiritual, just your overall well-being. Well, it is spiritual. So the serpent. I talked about this in my last video a little bit, but I'm gonna dedicate this video to finding out who the serpent, what the serpent is, and how it affects us. So the serpent, again, in ancient times, the serpent in Egyptology, when you study Egyptology, serpents were looked at, they were revered. They were revered. They were looked at as both good and evil. They have a poisonous component as well as a healing component. If you get bit by a serpent, the same poison can be taken from that serpent, brought into a lab, processed, and cure you. So within the poison, there's also the cure. So for that reason, snakes were looked at as both good and evil, right? They can kill you and they can heal you with the same means by which they kill you, which is their poison. Also, snakes were also revered because of the shedding of their skins, right? New birth. So the shedding of their skins represent newness. And the same thing, we're supposed to shed the skin of our old selves, right? If you were a drunkard, if you were an alcoholic, if you was a drug addict, as you evolve, you shed that skin, that old you. So serpents represent newness. So they were revered for that as well. They're very cunning, very clever, very wise. So they're also revered for wisdom. So we see serpents throughout the various cultures have been held in high esteem. And again, they're considered both good and evil. In the Bible, in Numbers, we see the serpent as both good and evil. Why? It was fiery serpents who bit the children of Israel, claiming lives. And then later on, we see God instructed Moses to build a bronze serpent, raise it up on a pole. And when the children of Israel looked on the serpent, they were healed. So we see that the serpent in Numbers has a healing component and a venomous component. So we see there again, good and evil. It was good when it healed them. It was evil when it killed them in the book of Numbers, I believe chapter 20 or 21, somewhere around there. So we see serpents have, again, a serpent has a dual nature, and that dualistic nature is both good and evil, which brings us to Genesis chapter 3, I believe. In the Garden of Eden, there's a tree of knowledge, and there's a tree of knowledge. There's a tree of life, and then there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we find in depictions, when you study, iconograph? Yeah, iconograph, which is the study of images and pictures. Yeah, it's the study of pictures and images and symbols, right? So when you look at certain paintings of the garden and you see the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you'll see a serpent wrapped around that tree. Most often, the painter will put a serpent around that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So here is where we want to really decipher the serpent in the garden. So we see the serpent has a dualistic nature, but check this out. The tree of knowledge of good and evil is wrapped with the serpent, and the serpent tempts Eve. What is that tree called? The knowledge of what? Good and evil. I just showed you that the serpent has a dual nature of what? Good and evil. So we're starting to see the nature and the characteristic of the serpent. Okay, so the serpent has a character of good and evil, right? We know that it's revered. Depending on its context, it's good. And in some other contexts, it's evil. Okay, it's wrapped around the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So the tree in Deuteronomy, it says that, I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 20 or 19. One of those chapters in Deuteronomy says, man is the tree in the field. Man is the tree in the field. So trees, Shavat 15 is a Jewish holiday where that holiday is in reverence of the trees. Because when you study the Kabbalah and you learn about trees are symbolic of man. And in Deuteronomy it says man is the tree of the field. So when we see the serpent wrapped around the tree, what we're actually seeing in terms of studying the iconograph, which is the study of pictures and images. And by the way, this is an allegory. This is a parable in the Bible. It's not a little tree. It's not a little snake. It's representative of something else. It's a deeper spiritual meaning. It's an esoteric meaning. So we see the serpent wrapped around a tree, and tree represents man. The tree of life that was in the garden would be representative of Jesus. Hence, in John, he says, I am the vine. Vine is of a tree, a branch, and ye are the branches, right? He said, I'm the vine and you are the branches. This is what Jesus calls himself. He refers to himself as a tree. So the tree of life would be symbolic of Jesus. And the tree of the knowledge of good and evil would be representative of man. Why is it a knowledge of good and evil? Because the tree has a serpent on it. We find the serpent on the tree. So the knowledge of good and evil is the serpent. Now, I know a lot of y'all will be saying that don't make sense. It doesn't, and it does. It doesn't make sense to those if you're not using spiritual discernment. If you're using spiritual discernment, it makes perfect sense. Now, let me bring it further, closer to your rational mind. In the book of Exodus, God told Moses to throw down his rod. Now, I want to focus on the rod for a second. The rod in a king's hand, his staff, which is a rod, staff, synonymous, can be used interchangeably. The rod represents your spinal cord. Physiologically, in terms of metaphorically and allegorically, it represents authority. A king's staff represents his authority. His scepter, rod, staff, all are synonymous. It's a sign of power. It's a sign of strength, and it's a sign of authority. The rod, the king's scepter, the king's staff. Now, physiologically, the king's rod or the king's staff or Moses' rod physiologically represents, in man, it represents your spinal cord. The spinal cord is your center of strength. When you study the physiology, the anatomy, the spinal cord is your center. It is your core of strength. That's why they'll say he has no backbone. It means power. It means he has no strength. He can't stand up for himself. He doesn't stand up straight. He's not man enough. He has no backbone. Synonymous with he has no balls, right? So your spinal cord represents your power, right? Slip a disc and you'll see what I mean, right? Get a herniated or a bulging disc and you'll realize how important that spinal cord is. So the spinal cord is a key component. It is central to your authority over yourself, your body, your strength. So the rod, Moses' rod, represents the spinal cord. So where does the serpent come into all this? Because this is to decipher the serpent. So watch this. Stay with me. God tell Moses to throw down his rod when he's facing Pharaoh's magicians, right? Or sorcerers, right? And when Moses throw down his rod turns into a serpent. And Moses' serpent eats up Pharaoh's serpents. Go read this. I think it's Exodus chapter 4 or 5, somewhere in Exodus, right? But wait a minute. There's that serpent again. Moses, throw down your rod. That has here's some esotericism. Esotericism means deep spiritual meaning. Check this out. When God tells Moses to throw down his rod, and I just told you the rod represents your spinal cord. What God is telling Moses is, and your spinal cord represents your authority. What God is saying to Moses, throw down your rod. In other words, Moses, put down your authority and let's use my authority. Moses, put down your spinal cord, your rod, your power. Your spinal cord gives you the independence, right? Your spinal cord represents your independence. Again, he has no back, grow a backbone, independence, strength. You're relying on yourself. That's what the spinal cord is, your strength, yourself. God tell Moses, throw down your rod. Rod represents spinal cord. Moses, throw down your own independence. Throw down your own authority. Throw down your own strength. Throw it down. When Moses throws down his rod, which is his own strength, it turns into a serpent. Now this is God's strength, right? And the serpent eats up Pharaoh's serpents, which is God's power over Pharaoh's power. That's what that represented. God power over Pharaoh's power. God power over man power. But God told Moses, throw down the rod, which is his spinal cord, which is his own reliance, his own self-reliance, his own self-independence, his own self-power and authority. Cast it down. Later on, he picked it back up, and it went from a serpent back to a rod, which also has esoteric meaning, throw down your own power, let me work, and then pick up back your power, right? Give up your power, let me work, then you can take back your power. That's what God told Moses. Give me the power, let me work. After I'm done, I'll give you back your power. See how that works? Esotericism. That's called esotericism, which is hidden meaning in the scriptures, deciphering the scriptures. But we want to stay on the serpent. So Moses threw down his rod, which represents the spinal cord, which turns into a serpent. So there's the serpent again. In the Garden of Eden, tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree represents the man, the serpent's around the tree. Now, I just showed you how Moses threw down the rod, which represents the spinal cord physiologically, which turns to a serpent. In the garden, we have a tree wrapped with a serpent that tempts Eve. So here we have the tree, which represents man. The serpent is interchangeable with the spinal cord. I just showed you that in Moses with the rod, which represents the spinal cord. And the serpent and the rod, which represents the spinal cord, turns into a serpent. So the serpent in the Garden of Eden is wrapped around the tree, man tree, and the tree that is wrapped around is man's spinal cord. The spinal cord is the center, right? It is what allows you to stand upright. So the serpent in the garden is intertwined with the spinal cord. Now there's something in the spinal cord called the sushumna. Sushumna, yes, sushumna. I want to make sure I'm saying it correct. The sushumna is a canal in the spinal cord. Now watch this. We're going to further decipher the serpent. So we're getting somewhere. The serpent in the garden represents the spinal cord, right? Because we see Moses throwing down his rod, and the rod represents the spinal cord, and the serpent, the spinal cord, the rod turns into a serpent. So we see the serpent and the spinal cord have some kind of connection. There's a connection between your spinal cord and the serpent. Throw down the rod, it turns into a serpent. The rod represents the spinal cord. So there's a correlation. Let's further flush this out. Let's further decipher this. We're getting somewhere here, folks. Let's further decipher this. So check this out. Your spinal cord has the sushumna, but your spinal cord has two fluids that flows up and down the spinal cord. Those two fluids start from the third ventricle in the brain, and it goes down the claustrum, and it's called the cerebrospinal fluid. Those two fluids that go down are called the cerebrospinal fluid, but they're differentiated, and it's called the ida and the pingala, which is ida is magnetic, has a magnetic property. The pingala has a electrical property. The magnetic property is associated with moon, with lunar energy. The pingala has a electrical energy, which is associated with the sun. That's why in the stomach area is called your solar plexus. Solar refers to the sun. So those two fluids that flows up and down the spinal cord are also associated with the serpent. I'll tell you why. Those two fluids are considered male and female, good and evil. We're seeing it again, right? Now, so those two fluids are associated with the serpent. Why? Because the serpent is associated with the spinal cord, and those two fluids flow up and down the spinal cord. Now, so why is that? It still doesn't make any sense, right? Where are we going with this? Here's where we're going. The serpent tempted Eve. How did the serpent tempt Eve? Okay. Because the serpent is intrinsic, it's innate. It's innate, meaning it belongs to your physiology. It belongs to your physiology because it's associated with your spinal cord. It's associated with your cerebral spinal fluid, which is differentiated into the Ida and the Pingala, which is positive and negative, which is male and female, which is sun, which is solar and lunar, and it is all energy. So the serpent is, now we can say the serpent is a dualistic energy that flows up and down mankind's spinal cord. Are you seeing where I'm going with this? The serpent, we're scientifically deciphering this. We're decoding this. We're getting down to the nitty gritty. The serpent in the Garden of Eden it represents the dualistic yin and yang, right? In the Orient, male and female, negative and positive, solar and lunar, and electromagnetic energy that flows up and down the spinal cord. This is the serpent. We're declassifying the serpent. We're getting to the nitty-gritty, the rooter and the tutor of the serpent. Now, how does that serpent influence us? Check this out. Whenever you hear a voice telling you to do something you know you shouldn't be doing, that's the serpent. Whenever you hear, and something, let's do something simple. Your doctor tell you have to stop drinking because you're having liver and kidney and all kind of ailments. And you stop drinking for a few days. And then that voice comes in your head and says, man, you had a stressful day at work, real stressful day. And the Bible says a dog goes back to his vomit, which is just another way of saying we go back, we do what we normally do. We're humans of creatures of habit. We go back to what we're used to. So you have a very difficult day. It triggered. You had a trigger. Triggers your old drinking. And a voice comes in your head and says, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to the bar. You go to the bar, you have a good time. Had a great time. That was the serpent. That's how I'm showing you how the serpent works. You had a bad day at work today. You're on the bus, you're driving home, you're on the train, however you commute. And the voices in your head are telling you, I hate this person in the office. They really did that. And all day it's just eating at you. And, your whole evening is just ruined. That's the serpent. Why is that the serpent? Let's further deep. We're going to figure this serpent out. Check this out. We're going to find him out and expose him. Check this out. The Bible says in Genesis that the serpent was the most subtle of all creatures created. Now, what does this mean? We're going to look at the nature, the characteristics, and attributes of the serpent. Another characteristic of the serpent, or attribute, is that he is the most subtle of all creatures. Now, let's look at the word subtle. The word subtle, what does the word subtle mean? The word subtle, right? Subtle word means that which goes unrecognizable, that which is not noticeable, that which is inconspicuous, not obvious. Excuse me. See, we decipher Satan so much that he's mad, he's making me sneeze. He's influencing me to sneeze right now, trying to throw me off. But we're going to get back on focus. So the serpent represents, the word subtle is a characteristic of the serpent, which means he is not recognizable. You never see him. He is difficult to perceive. The serpent is the most subtlest creature. Therefore, he goes beyond your five senses. Your five senses rarely, if ever, recognize the serpent. Why? Because he is the most subtlest creature of the field. Okay. So, when you have a negative thought to harm yourself by smoking a cigarette, that is the serpent. because he is so subtle, you don't realize he is making you smoke that cigarette to harm your lungs. When you drink, when your doctor tell you not to drink, or your doctor tell you to stop smoking and you're still smoking and drinking, that's the serpent. He is causing you by means of your synaptic network. It's called your we're going to decipher the serpent. Your synaptic network is pretty much the wiring of your synapse, which are points in your brain by which the neurons communicate. Think of it as a Grand Central Plaza, right? The Grand Central or Broadway Junction. Think of it like that, right? A junction in terms of transportation is where you can catch a variety of bus, right? You have a bus stop. Bus stop, you might have one or two bus stop there, right? You have a train stop. Maybe the A train stop there, the C train might stop there. But if you go to the hub, which is like Port Authority, you have all the trains that stop there. And from that junction, right, all the trains dispense and disperse out to their destination. That's the synaptic network in your brain. Your synaptic is where all your thoughts will gather, and then from there they dispense. And when I say thoughts, I mean all the neurons, the trillions of neurons, and then from there, by means of what's called neurotransmitters, they're sent out through your nervous system, your pneumogastric nerve, your vagus nerve, all your different, your cranial nerves, and that's how thoughts are dispensed. Think of, like I said, all the trains meet up at Port Authority, all the bus meet up at Port Authority, you get on them, and then you go to your destination. That's how the brain works. So your synaptic network is like that. And how the serpent works is that thoughts are signals. That's what thoughts are, electrical signals. First of all, let me just say this. Your whole makeup is electricity. Your entire makeup is electricity. You're just an electrical appliance. Every human being is an electrical appliance. Your heart has what's called a synode, S-Y-N-O-D, synode. I think it's spelled like that, but it's a synode. You Google it. And synode is just a pulse, right? The beat. But each synode releases electricity. And your brain has what's called brain waves. And you have delta in this order. You have delta, theta, alpha, beta, and gamma in that order, in that exact order. And you have different cycles. Gamma is probably like 26. Beta is probably like 21 or 20. Alpha is about 14. Theta is about 10. And delta is about 4. And if you can't sleep at night, that means your brain wave is in gamma and between gamma and maybe beta. And that's high frequency. So that means your thoughts are going real fast. You can't sleep. You need to come down to theta and delta to sleep, right? So, and those are brain waves, right? EEG, electroencephalograph. You can actually research that stuff. Go to the doctor. And then, so it's all electric. Your whole body is just one big electrical appliance, right? And this is important to understand. Why? Because now you'll understand your thoughts. Thoughts are, if your whole body's an electrical appliance, that means each thought you have is just a signal. That's it. It's a thought signal. A thought is a signal. A signal is a thought. And that signal travels at 186,400 miles per second. That's why your thoughts seem so seamless. Like me moving my hand like this is just thoughts. But it seems seamless, right? Like it's a whole process that's going on. But it takes less, like I said, 186,400 miles per second. So that's nanosecond. It's going at such speed. Your thoughts go at such speed that it seems as if it's not even happening. It's just all one, right? So how Satan, which is we find out is associated with your spinal cord, which is associated with the cerebral spinal fluid, differentiated into two, male, female, sun, moon, negative, positive, yin, yang, tree of knowledge, good and evil. That's what the serpent is. The serpent is the good and the evil. That's what the serpent is. He has a dualistic nature, good and evil, poison and healing, right? He poisoned the children of Israel with fiery serpents. He healed the children of Israel with the serpent of the bronze, right? He took Moses' rod and turned it into a serpent and killed Pharaoh's serpent. Good, evil, evil, good, right? So how Satan influenced your synaptic network, which is your thought, responsible for your thoughts, and your neurons, which is responsible for your thoughts, is he influenced the signals, your thought signals, and your thoughts govern your actions, and your actions become your habits, so on and so forth. So, we're really breaking the serpent down. So this is the serpent. This is how you identify the serpent and know what, who, when, where, how, why the serpent, how the serpent function, what the serpent is in the Garden of Eden. Now, the next thing, so we just pinpoint, and broke down what the serpent is. I gave you some characteristics. I gave you the nature of the serpent, which is dualistic. I gave you some characteristics of the serpent. I tell you how the serpent influences your mind by means of your signals, your brain waves, your signals, which is your thought patterns, your paradigm, your subset to the subconscious mind. The serpent influences all of that by means of electrical signals, because you're one big electrical appliance, human beings. So the serpent influenced you by means of electrical signals called thoughts. And the garden now, I talked about this in one of my other videos. The garden is the right hemisphere of the brain. And the garden is also considered the heaven in your brain. And earth would be the left hemisphere of the brain. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, I could do a whole other video on that, on the right, left hemisphere. And trust me, I got tremendous information on that. I'll probably do another video on that. But it's 26 minutes. I'm going to stop there. So I hope this video was helpful in terms of deciphering, decoding, declassifying, and identifying the serpent. So this way you know how to. So here's the last thing I want to say. The sum total, the ultimate purpose of life is not about material gain, wealth, so on and so forth. It's about overcoming the serpent within yourself. The ultimate purpose of life is being able to not be outwitted, outfoxed by the said serpent that goes up and travels up and down your spinal cord. That's who you're wrestling with, and that's who the serpent is called. Satan later on. Satan means adversary, and adversary is simply evil, which is now in opposition of good. Because remember, last thing, the tree of the knowledge of good, and here's a key word that you need to focus on. And is a coordinating conjunction in terms of its grammatical syntax. It's a coordinating conjunction. Syntax, which is the rules of grammar. And is a coordinating conjunction. It coordinates, it ties, it combines. So good and coordinating conjunction, evil. So prior to that it was just a knowledge of good. Then and evil. You see what I'm saying? So and ties in the evil. So it's about overcoming the evil with just the good. That's the whole purpose, to overcome the serpent and go from dualistic, which is the and, because and introduce evil. Good and evil. Introduction to evil, which now gives you what? Two. Two means dualism. The purpose is to overcome dualism and get back to singularity, which is oneness with God. Till next time, if you like the video, you know what to do. Peace.